Welcome to the Counter Narrative Podcast, a show designed to change the way we talk and think about education. By sharing stories of successes and triumphs, we aim to challenge the dominant narrative that often negatively portrays our disenfranchised populations. I'm your host, Charles Williams, an urban educator for more than 15 years, a current school principal in Chicago, an educational consultant, an equity advocate, and the co-host of Inside the Principal's Office. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Counter Narrative Podcast. I'm so excited that you have, decided to listen to yet another episode. We were just talking about this earlier, and so maybe you're listener number 4. I don't know. No, I'm joking. So just welcome back. I'm really excited to have this conversation. So last year, on a whim, I'm really bad about planning ahead. And I was like, it would be awesome to do a holiday episode and get people from all over the world with different celebrations. And so I reached out and I ended up with a bunch of Christmas people. But it was still a great conversation. We had an amazing discussion. And so I thought, hey, this year I'm going to do that again. I want to have some fun. So I reached out to some podcaster friends. And lo and behold, I got 2 Christmas and 2 Hanukkah friends. So we got some diversity happening in here amongst other ways that we could have some diversity. But we're going to have some fun. We're going to have that conversation again. And so before I launch into these conversations, we're just going to go around the horn here. If you could do me a favor, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are, your podcast. So the listeners, you're going to walk away today with not just this podcast, but potentially 4 others, which I'm sure you listened to before you came here because they're all amazing individuals. So I'm just going to go in order on my screen. So Mealy, I'm going to kick it off with you.
Okay, so this is Mealy. I am the co-host of Unprofessional Development. My co-host is Tedisco. He is not here. But I'm a math teacher. He's an English teacher. We're in the North Carolina area. I teach high school. He teaches middle school, though he's taught high school as well. And we just try to have conversations kind of real similar to the way that Charles does. And we believe that the conversations that you have in the break room, in the workroom, whatever, if you call it that, or the bar room or the coffee house, are much better than the professional development that you often get when there is someone up there with 10 slides and a pun and something they're trying to sell. So we tend to think that that's how it happens. And then we also go off on tangents and tell weird stories because that's what we do as teachers. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Great show. It is the best form of PD, by the way. All right. Aviva, you are up.
All right, my name is Aviva Levin, and I am the host of Lesson Impossible, an exploration of educational innovation. And it's styled after Mission Impossible. So every couple weeks, you get a mission, should you choose to accept it. And I've got some teacher special agents, which all of you guys today have been a special agent in my very elite group. And yeah, just trying to challenge the status quo and see what innovative people are doing. And then I started a Mission Impossible style, or still Lesson Impossible blog for language teachers. So trying to bring that same energy to strategies and resources for the language classroom. And I'm in Seattle, Washington right now.
Seattle. Yeah. I think I still have rope burns from sliding down like Tom Cruise, but luckily I did not stop before the floor though, so don't watch. Batsheva, I'm going to come over to you.
Okay. I'm Batsheva Frankel, and my podcast is called Overthrowing Education. And maybe that says it all. You all have also all been on my podcast, so which is wonderful. It's all about what great education could and should be and how to make it happen, how to advocate for it. And it's a lot of fun, as you all know. I also do commercial parodies at the beginning of every episode that highlight a fake educational product that we wish were real. And also I have a game show at the end of my podcast. And I've been now on 2 of your podcasts where you turn the tables on me and
Nice.
Aviva and Mealy, who made me play a game show on your podcast when I was a guest, which was very fun. Yeah. And I'm an educational consultant, and that PD that Mealy was talking about, I actually do the good kind. That's actually really good, where I do not stand up and do 10 slides and a pun and sell something.
It's only 8 slides and then a pun.
It's only 8 slides and
Yes.
2 puns. No,
Yes.
it's actually really, really practical and helpful. And I've written a book, and so I try to do like really practical, and it with my company called New Lens Ed. And yeah, that's what I do.
All right. Thank you. And there is a game show for you at the end. No.
No?
That was the question I didn't say. No.
It's all Christmas
Surprise!
trivia.
Yes,
There
all
we go.
Christmas.
You'll see, I might rock it. I might surprise you.
So we're going to close it out. Andre, we are coming over to you.
Hi, friends. Andre Dowdy here from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. It was just 78 degrees today outside. We were supposed to put up all of our summer gear, and it has not been put up just yet. Just Oklahoma weather. The podcast that I co-hosted with my wife. My wife is an educator. I also am an educator. And we have a podcast called See What Had Happened. And what happens is anytime you hear a really good story, most times it starts off with a see what had happened was, and then they tell you the good story. Mm-hmm. Well, ours is just that. It's an educational podcast from the stories, from the good, the bad, the everything in between. Every story from the time that I had a student who climbed a TV station's antenna. Nice. And he wanted to jump off and be Randy Macho Man Savage.
Oh, wow.
To the time my wife had a second grader who wanted to be the Tasmanian devil and literally said, blah, 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 and then wrecked the room. The good, the bad, and everything in between. So these are the conversations that most teachers don't hear about. Those funny stories, just like you said, inside of those teachers' lounges or those side conversations in the hallway. And we lift and share some of those ideas and strategies and how to work through them. Yep. And so check us all out. I love that all of us are podcasters, and I love that each podcast has their own flavor to it. I think that's real dope. I like that.
Yep.
Absolutely. I was very tempted to do the, oh yeah, but then I was like leveled that I'm going to like, oh no, I'm not going to do that.
Hey, the funniest part was he got about 8 to 10 feet after climbing over the barbed wire. So I had to climb over the barbed wire. Oof. My clothes are ripped. He got all the way up. I finally caught him. And as soon as I caught him, he was like, you got me, Mr. Dowdy. And then he starts to climb down. And I'm like, wait.
There you go.
I'm out. Hold on. That is not the payoff I was looking for. Like, what? And then he just walked back with me like nothing had happened.
Nothing happened.
And I'm like, everything's happened. My pants are ripped. My shirt's ripped. I'm out of breath. I'm tired. Yeah. Those stories. And it's one of the funniest stories in my educational journey.
That is hilarious. I love that. Well, for those of you joining us, so this is not going to be a traditional show. We're not talking about, education will probably creep in because we're educators. That's what we do. But our focus is not on education today, but instead it is the holiday episode. So we're going to get ready for our very first question. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we have 2 guests who celebrate Hanukkah, 2 guests who celebrate Christmas. And so we're going to talk a little bit about which holiday each of these guests celebrate. But more importantly, what does that holiday mean to them? What does it mean to each of you? So I'm going to go backwards on this one. That way there's no single person going last all the time. So Andre, I'm going to let you kick things off. What holiday do you celebrate? And what does it mean to you?
Yeah, so mine is almost a hybrid now. Grew up celebrating Christmas and all the things of Christmas. And I'm a musician. My mother is a musician. So we were literally like the church kid, always doing the church plays, singing and dancing and all of that. And so you would do all of the traditional things of singing the songs, doing the cantatas, doing the plays, you name it. I was probably that character. It shifted once when I got a little older, when it got away from the presents and it just became more focused on the family And so the tradition that we have now is just family game night. Ours starts Saturday, and we're going to play every game that you can think of, taboos, categories, because it's just about the gathering of family. And the way that it came about was we were at a funeral, and one of the family members stood up and said, "It feels so good to see all of your faces. I hadn't seen your faces in X amount of years." And then the person paused and said, "I hate that it took a death for all of us to get together." And so from that point on, I looked at my mom, I looked at my wife, and I was like, we can change that. And the way to change it is, instead of coming and exchanging gifts, how about we just come and just celebrate each other and laugh and giggle, play games. Of course, we're going to eat smorgasbord of all the foods, but that's our tradition now. It's hybrid now. Yeah.
I like that. It's beautiful. So I'm just going to keep it going around the horn here. So Batsheva.
So I'm a Hanukkah celebrator. It's actually pronounced Hanukkah, but I didn't want to put you all through that. So,
but it's okay.
Yeah, so that's what I celebrate, and it's a lovely holiday. I love it. It's really sweet. It is not a major holiday in the Jewish calendar. So, for people who don't know, there's many, many major holidays in the Jewish calendar, and they each have their own kind of cool thing about it. And some of them are more sort of intensive than others in terms of prepping for it and what it means and everything else. Hanukkah's like super chill. I mean, there's not much to it really. It's not, like I said, it's not a major holiday, but it's a lovely holiday. It celebrates the idea of miracles. And when in the 2nd century BCE, when the Syrian Greeks were trying to destroy the Jews spiritually and make them assimilate entirely into Greek culture and get rid of all of their Judaism, that they did not succeed. And there was a big battle, and somehow miraculously this little band of ragtag Jews won against this huge army. So that's the biggest miracle that we celebrate. And then there's also this idea of the oil that lasted 8 days, which you've possibly heard about. And so the whole time is meant to be like a time of miracles and reflection and bringing light into the world, that it's a dark time, that every night we light, and we publicize the miracle by putting our Hanukkahs, our Hanukkah menorahs, in the windows, so that we can kind of publicize when it's safe to do so, because obviously there are many, many times in Jewish history that it is not safe to do so. But when it is, that's what we do. And so that's just really lovely. It's just lovely to fill our window with, the whole family's Hanukkahs. We each light our own, and it's really lovely. And we just sit and kind of reflect and eat. Sugar, like donuts is a big food. There's jelly-filled donuts. They're called sufganiyot. And we eat latkes. I mean, Aviva, I don't want to step all over what you might say, but those are the things that we do.
You're emphasizing my favorite part, which is eating everything deep fried.
Exactly. It's all about deep frying in oil.
Tradition to deep fry everything.
Right.
And it is amazing.
Yeah. So like lots of and cheese. A lot of people don't know this, but cheese is a big Hanukkah food. So cheesy, greasy pizza, you cannot go wrong with that.
All right. I've definitely learned some things today.
Yeah.
The last thing I would say about it as a memory that I have is when I was growing up, I was one of 3 Jewish people in my entire elementary school. My brother was one of them. And then the third one was Howard Fisher. We were the only 3. I was always the only one in my class. So my dad would come in and explain to all the students what Hanukkah was all about. And it was really cool because nobody else's parents got to come in and, talk. So it was like always, that was like the thing is, here comes my dad talking about Hanukkah. It was very sweet. That's a nice memory.
I like that you remember Howard Fisher's first and last name.
Right.
He's somewhere right now.
Howard Fisher.
Like, wait.
Shout out Howard Fisher.
First and last name. Woo.
Oh, yeah.
So, Aviva, I'm going to bring it over to you.
Yeah, so I grew up celebrating Hanukkah, and like Batsheva said, not that big of a deal. But when I went from a Jewish school to a like secular public school, then it became a much bigger deal because it became a big deal at school. Because early '90s and multiculturalism and all that push. And I think too, my parents were aware that all my new school friends were getting lots of presents in December, and so it went from getting like just small things to bigger gifts for Hanukkah. And my mom also came to the school, but unlike it being a positive memory, I was absolutely mortified that my mom was coming into the school and she'd take over the display case at the front and like fill it with all this like Hanukkah stuff and information and wanted to come in my class. And I was like, oh God, please don't. And you also have to know that she took our poodle everywhere with her, who wasn't very well trained. So it was just running through the hallways of the school as my mom was like putting this display together, and I was pretending that I didn't know who she was. And then, yeah, so I married someone who's not Jewish. So I also celebrate Christmas now in a very secular way. I'm a religious studies minor, so I know a lot more about this than he does. Christmas has always been about Santa. And so I've enjoyed the lights and that Advent candy aspect of it, and just together creating our own traditions around what we do for Hanukkah together, what we do on Christmas morning together with his family as well. So to me, I think it really, like everyone has touched on, there's like a lot of family there because
Mhm.
it's about incorporating what other people have grown up with and trying to keep that tradition going.
Wonderful. I love it. Thank you so much, Mealy. I'm going to close it out
Yeah,
with you on this question.
sure. And by the way, neither of you mentioned, and so maybe it doesn't apply to Hanukkah, but the a dreidel, is the dreidel not part of the thing? Because they
See, I was
dreidel,
going to
dreidel,
ask, but I was like,
dreidel. I
I'm
made
not
No,
you
no,
doing
no.
out
that.
of clay.
It's actually really funny that you said that because years and years and years ago, someone got me like a really cool dreidel. And ever since then, I've had this growing dreidel collection of dreidels from all over the world. I mean, they're incredible. They're gorgeous. And so when people go away, they get them for me. So my husband has this thing of like every night he gives me a different, really cool, beautiful dreidel, or sometimes they're funny and goofy dreidels, whatever. So I have like this insane collection. So it's really funny that you said that, and I didn't mention it because I actually have.
Do they?
But dreidel it's a fun game, and I mean, like we didn't play it this year, but we did it as kids, and it's a fun like little gambling game if you like to gamble.
Okay. Does
So
that
we
have
do
any?
it with.
Does it have any like other than like the fact that Hanukkah has been like commercialized just due to its coincidence with Christmas? Does it
So
have
the
anything to do
story
with Hanukkah and the dreidel? Are they tied together some way?
So the
Yeah,
idea
well,
was that the Jews were hiding up in the mountains to escape the oppressors,
but it was
and
actually the Romans in this
yeah
case. A little bit
yeah
later, it was the Romans.
and to study the Torah, to fulfill their religious commandments. And the idea was that because that was forbidden, whenever someone saw the Romans coming, they'd be like, quick, hide the books. And then they'd pull out the dreidel. And then the Romans would come and be like, oh, you're just gambling. Carry on then. And then
Right.
once they went away, then the book, the study came out again,
Okay.
which is usually the opposite, especially in our classrooms of, you know, mostly kids are playing a game and pretending to study, not studying and pretending to play a game. But
Yeah. So it
Now
was
you
like
know where my love for game-based
I was
learning
gonna
comes
I was
from.
gonna say it's basically Blook-It from back in the day. Is that
Nice.
okay?
So
So
what about you,
anyway,
Mealy?
For asking that because I legit every time I hear like your winter Christmas songs, someone always throws in dreidel, dreidel, dreidel. I mean,
right?
The
Yeah.
silly songs. There are really not any great Hanukkah songs. They're just really
Adam
hard.
Sandler begs to differ.
That is
By the way,
right. That's the soul song that I would say.
and I think there's
They're
multiple
really.
versions, right? There's at least two, if not three versions of it that he updated.
There is a song that we sing, but it's called Maot Ser Rock of Ages. But it's and I mean, and it's a really cool song, but nobody knows every single verse, or I shouldn't say nobody. Most people don't even know all the verses. You get through like after the first verse, and you're like, la 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 la. You like
That
start
sounds
mumbling,
like every
making up the
Christmas
words,
song,
right? Like you get through that secret other verses that nobody actually knows. So, but
Every
nobody really
Christmas song,
sings them.
you'll, and then once when you know the part, you'll jump in on that
There
part.
you go.
Exactly,
There
exactly,
you go.
exactly. So that's the mystery of the dreidel.
Awesome. I'm glad we cleared that up.
Thank you for that.
So anyway, I'm gonna say I celebrate Christmas, and so I've got a lot of associations with it. So I was a nominal Christian growing up. Like I was raised Catholic, but we weren't very spiritual. It was very traditional and religious, and not a lot of meaning behind it. And then I kind of drifted away in my 20s or whatever. And sometime in my late 20s, um, I was born again, and I have been, a follower of Christ for almost 30 years now. I lose track of the time. But anyway, so Christmas does have like a lot of significance to me from a spiritual aspect. I believe it, that the word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and all of that, without getting into like preaching. But so it really does have a lot of spiritual meaning to me. But it also is like a time of family. I was going to say one of the traditions that I had as a kid that we started probably sometime maybe like when I was like 9, 10, 11, that I've also done with my kids, that I think a lot of people do, is the opening of the one present on Christmas Eve. I don't know if any of you guys do that, but it's nice to have that. It's like, well, can we open like one present? So, and sometimes the person opening it gets to pick, and sometimes the mom or the dad gets to pick, and and we kind of go, no, there's one that they want them to enjoy, or something that's going to, probably not the big present that's, that they're going to, save that for Christmas, but something that's going to be cool or interesting. Sometimes it would just be like a book, so that like, hey, that way the kid will start reading. We can go to bed. But, and I will tell you this other tradition that I don't have, but that I always think of. I had a boss, and he did this once, and he completely messed up his whole Christmas life. Okay. So his kids were little, and he decided that not only does Santa bring presents, but he also decorates the house. So wait till the kids go to bed on Christmas Eve. And not only do you have to assemble all the toys, but you have to entirely decorate the tree, the house, the lights. Everything had to happen on Christmas Eve. So he like was always like finishing up at like 4 a.m. You know what I mean? And kids are like getting up like as early as they can on Christmas Day. And he's just there like trying to like caffeinate himself into being able to make it through. And I'm like, oh no.
Why?
That was, but once you do it once, that's now the kids are like, oh, well, Santa decorates the house at Christmas. We can't decorate it. You know what I mean? So,
like Santa didn't have enough to do. Like,
does that make any sense that Santa's decorating
that they would have to then decorate everyone's houses?
Decorate everyone's house. I know. Yes, he's a busy guy.
Santa contracted his services out. That's what Oh wow! Well, thank you for all of those. In our household, we too celebrate Christmas, and like Andre mentioned, it is transformed over the years. Right, my baby is 18 now, so Christmas has taken on something vastly different. Where the excitement around all the gifts and things like that is kind of weaned away, and it's more about let's spend some time together, and just coming together. And obviously, during these COVID times, that's becomes even more challenging. And my 18-year-old doesn't make it any easier because, well, she refuses to get vaccinated. So yes, I'm calling you out on the air because we've had that
Get
conversation.
vaccinated. It's a good choice.
Thank you. Yeah, peer pressure is okay in this case. But I've had to tell her like, okay, well, we have to celebrate with you separately, outside of the rest of the family. But even before that, right? It's just, before the vaccination was around, we all had to do things differently. And so definitely looking forward to the time when we can get back to some sort of normalcy. So as I start to think about that, that leads us right into our next question here, is that as we're thinking back to past Christmases, kind of like where it is that we want us to go, that fond memory, that tradition or that memory that you had, that when you think about Christmas, it's like sparks up. I know I shared in the last episode we did about this was, my grandma would give me this little thing of Legos. That was like a tradition that we did. Something now, or that we used to do right before the pandemic, is that I started going with my wife to her family on Christmas Eve. Everybody would come over to our house on Christmas Day, and we would play left, right, center. So I don't know about you. So thinking about dreidel and gambling, left, right, center is an amazing game, which you could either make a lot of money or lose a lot of money. You could do quarters. Every once in a while, people get a little brave and they're like, let's do dollar, dollar, dollar. So it's a fun game, great game. So if you never played, I would encourage it. And
I'm
I know this year I was
gonna Google
asking
it
my
now.
wife, I said, wait, are we getting together? Are we doing left, right, center? And she's like, no, not this year. It's like, oh, so cannot wait for that tradition to pick back up. So I'm just going to pop over. Aviva, I'm going to let you start this one off. What is a tradition or a memory that sparks some joy for you in these otherwise challenging and troubling times?
Um, I I think for me it definitely is having my husband try and do the phonetic pronunciation of the Hebrew blessings for Hanukkah,
Oh, nice.
because
Is
it's
that fun
always
for you or for him?
it's fun for me. But I'm sure he'd have answers too about me taking on some of his traditions, but there is something I think special about trying something that you've never understood before. And
Yeah.
so I'd like to keep that one going. Um, but you'll have to come back to me because I need to think a little bit harder about some of the
Oh,
traditions we might have created accidentally.
that is not a problem. So I'm just going to go around the circle this way this time. So Mealy, it's back to you.
Okay, so one of the things I think back on, there was a fun tradition that I don't think I get to go with my family, but when I was at college, I went to one, and then we ended up hosting two. So I'd been at college like a year, and someone had what they called it a bing along. Okay, and so it was a BYOB party, and there was quite a few people were well lubricated, I guess I will say. And then once it kind of like warms up, they would pass out like a packet with the lyrics, speaking of people who can't remember the lyrics to all of the songs, and they would put on Bing Crosby's Christmas album, and we would play it from start to finish. And there was a lot of people just like arm on shoulders and just kind of like in a big circle, singing along and binging along and having a good time. And one of the traditions that I found out later, that Santa always makes an appearance at this party, and whoever was hosting the party, the roommates, someone was Santa. Who was going to be Santa was a secret, but the people at the party, they could at any point at the person that they knew was going to be dressed up as Santa later, and Santa would have to take a swig of whatever they were drinking, because the goal was that Santa was going to be the most inebriated person at the thing. And so I have two recollections of that. One was the first time I went to it, and this young lady was Santa, and so she gets up on like a chair or something like that, and she's handing out bottles of beer. But then someone a little far away is like, Santa, I want a beer. So her faculties were not there. So what does she do? She throws a bottle of beer. It clocks somebody in the temple. Okay. They go down, right? Their like friend is like helping them because they're like hitting the head, but Santa like throws another one, hits that person that was helping the other person like in the back of the head, and it was finally Santa had to be wrestled to the ground, and the bag of beer bottles taken away from her. So that was some good times there that I reckon so I think the tradition of the bing along is good. I don't know if the whole Santa being overly intoxicated is a good tradition there.
That would be one to remember.
Yes.
Andre, what about you?
Our traditions. My dad worked 16 hours a day, like growing up. So whenever he was there, he was present with us. He always came to my sports games. He always came to my brother's sports games, any of our band recitals, concerts, marching, football. He was there. But we also knew that he missed out on a lot of stuff because he was always at work. So when it came time for any family gathering, he was the game person. He enjoyed playing them, and so that tradition still comes alive here. Pre-COVID, the last one we had, I pulled up like my YouTube playlist of holiday songs, and I only gave you 2 seconds. And so we split up the teams. The younger crowd who thought that they knew everything, and then you had the old seasoned family members who love Bing and Nat, Nancy Wilson. So
Right.
we had a pretty good group list, and my wife and I were the host. And so you get 2 seconds talking amongst your team, and they're talking and trying to figure it out. And I mean, the music was diverse. Classics from Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time to Charlie Brown Christmas to a hip hop Christmas to Christmas in Holland. I mean, it was all over the place, but you only going to get 2 seconds of the song.
Wow.
And talking about some of the most fun we've ever had. And then you get an extra point if you can sing just a little bit of it. And of course, my family is full of singers. Some of them can't carry a tune. So now, I'll give you 7 points if you can sing. I mean, just the laughter, the joy, the family, the tradition, all of that is there. The last 2 years, we haven't had it. Since then, my dad has passed from cancer. And so this year, I'm really hoping this Saturday that we can recapture some of that spirit, that magic, that feeling. And I've got a few games set up. But I will say this. You are the fourth person who has said LCR and using real money.
Yeah.
So now I got to do a deep dive.
Yeah. I will share with you. It's a lot of fun.
Okay.
I've got a memory to bring up, and it's not a personal. Well, it's personal, but at my former school, we had breakfast with Santa, and parents would be there from like 3 a.m. making pancakes and eggs and sausages for all the students. And they'd come in and the whole gym would be set up, and there would be a big stage, and then Santa would be there. The kids could take photos. But we would have most of the kids from the school, lots of alumni. They would, when they're home from college, would come to this because it was like such a big deal. And then at around the end, like 10:15, we even had like a adjusted bell schedule so that kids, could come and be a part of it and weren't missing out on class. And then we did the 12 days of Christmas. And the idea was that each group of teachers got each day of Christmas, and you had to do like a funny sketch or sing a song. Or one year I got roped into doing a dance routine. And like we were talking before about staying too late at school. We stayed way too late at school to learn this dance routine to do. But the kids loved it. And then the very last, we had some really talented musicians on our staff. And then so the last kind of act was these teachers who formed a band, and then they would jam out on some classics and some new stuff. And it was just a really lovely way to feel connected to the staff and the students, and a real touchstone. But COVID, it's hard to have a big buffet when germs are everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, at least Santa wasn't throwing beer bottles, right?
Yeah. Just textbooks.
There you go.
Batsheva, what about you?
Well, you originally asked about a Christmas memory, and I actually do have one. No,
And
but I have one.
I wanted to clarify. Like,
No,
it doesn't
but I
to be
have one.
Christmas.
I have one. I'll give you my Hanukkah one later, but I'll
Okay,
have a Christmas one, and that's this. I was thinking about this. I went to NYU in the 80s. I was a drama major in the early to mid 80s. And I had this friend, Rick, and every December, we would go from the village where we lived, Greenwich Village, to Macy's and go find the Macy's Santa and take a picture sitting on Santa's lap, one of us on each side, which I think would be a little bit sketchy now. Like maybe that wouldn't be okay, but at the time, whatever. So we have, so two things I want to say. One of them is we have 4 years of pictures where you can watch, and you have to picture the 80s, the haircuts, the clothes, the attitude, everything. And 4 years of watching us go from freshmen in college to seniors in college, and what we wore and our cool, because we were like hip in the village and whatever. So it was really fun. But the other thing that about it that was very funny is one year, I think it was like our second year maybe. So Santa Claus was talking to us and asking us, you know, like, what do we do or whatever? And we said, oh, we're NYU students. And he goes, oh, Santa's an NYU student too. And we said, oh, we're drama majors. He goes, Santa is a film student. I'll never forget that. I thought that was so funny. But that's my Christmas memory is that. And I still have the pictures to embarrassingly to prove it somewhere. But my Hanukkah thing, the tradition.
You're supposed to say, and that's how I met my husband. That's the end of that thing.
That is so not how I met my husband.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I didn't meet my husband until I was like 39. So.
Okay. But your friend married. Did your friend marry Santa? No? Did you marry Santa either?
No, my friend actually passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right after Halloween one year. Oh, so that was really sad. Thanks, Mealy.
You're welcome.
But I have great pictures.
Was it my fault? I had nothing to do with that.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Anyway, but on a happier subject, for Hanukkah, one of the traditions that we somehow started is a long time ago, I guess, like, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. They don't even make them anymore. But I'm sure you've seen those kind of glasses that you get that are like sort of hologrammy. So when you look at lights, it makes a design. So I have I have 3 different kinds. Ones that make menorahs, Hanukkah menorahs, and one that makes dreidels out of every light, and one that makes Jewish stars out of all the lights. So just like our little tradition is, and when anybody comes over or whenever we're lighting every night, we put the glasses by the, by all the Hanukkahs, and they're all lit up. So it's really, really cool. I'll share pictures with you later because it's really cool how it looks with all the lights and the way the candles are all. So that's like, it's a 2-minute tradition, but we always do it. And anybody who comes over pre-COVID, that's what we would, they would do. Now it's just family. But.
Speaking of Santa, I have a question for the Christmas celebrators, which is
good because I had one for Hanukkah as well.
Okay, which is, how old were you when you found out about Santa, and did you perpetuate the lie / tradition for your own children if you have them?
Find out what, Aviva? what are you
I think
saying?
You need to put
Santa
a little.
Was married.
Right.
We'll put a disclaimer, parents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you are listening with your child, this is a good time to pause.
It's actually too late.
Yes, and we know you don't edit, so there goes that.
Oh man. So I know for me, I was a nerd. I was a nerdy little kid, and I remember just like logically it up. I'm like, well, first of all, there's no landmass at the North Pole, so where would he live? If anywhere, he'd live at the South Pole, right? Like there's, and then it was just like trying to do calculations in my like elementary school brain, like how would he get? Like there's no way, and of course I was told, no, it's magic, right, and all these things. But I was just a very nerdy, logical little guy, so it was gone forever for me. But I carried it with my girls for as long as I can. And I won't forget, maybe this had to be about 6 years ago now. So when my daughter was maybe 10, 11-ish, so a little longer, I bought her a bike and I did the whole thing, right? I put my boot with the powder to make it look like Santa's footsteps, leading out of the garage where her bike was. And I had parchment paper that was Santa's, wrote her a letter. Because her sister kept saying Santa's not real. And so I made it specifically like, you still believe this is a special gift for you. And she was like, Dad. And then later that night, I heard her in her room with her sister. She was like, I just pretend that he's still real so Dad believes it.
Oh,
you played me.
Oh, wow.
I don't want to break his heart.
She was doing it for me. And I was like,
so funny.
So yeah, that was my story.
That's kind of gift of the Magi-ish, if.
Yeah.
There you go. How's that for a reference?
I was gonna say I was probably about 8 or 9. I don't remember specifically, but I just kind of remember at some point I asked the question when it was just me, like around my mom, and her telling me that you had to like keep it up for the. I was the oldest of 3 siblings, and so I had to keep it up for however long I had to keep it up. But then when we were with our kids, we went to a church that was very kind of Pentecostally and stuff, and so where Satan and Santa were equivocated, and so it was like, oh, this is a perversion and all this kind of stuff, which I think at this point I'm like, no, that you can be a Christian and still have fun with Santa, and people get like a little too far, but
Yeah.
so we did not tell our kids that like we didn't perpetuate the myth. And I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing as I look back on it. But we did also tell them not to ruin it for their friends at school. We're like, hey, a lot of people believe this, and don't tell anyone. Da 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 da. But we're just like this is from us. You know what I mean? Like I worked hard for this.
I deserve the credit.
Right? Exactly.
Uh, so I'll just be raw and transparent here. I'm a black kid who grew up in the hood. We didn't have a chimney. So we would see, all of the TV shows, the Christmas things, and the milk and cookies. Uh, and I remember like, oh, and my mom and my dad was like, boy, please. There was no wonder, none of that. We work hard to get you these things, and we show appreciation to these things that we get you. And then just growing up, being a church kid as well, very similar. Santa, you supposed to change 2 letters, and that's Satan.
Right. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
and no, Satan, and then of course some of the religious people who really, really dug in, they connected it to every little thing. And so by age 4, I knew Santa wasn't real. But then I read about St. Nicholas and heard about who St. Nicholas was and how that framing of saying that word fast, translated by other people, could come out to sound like Santa Claus. So I thought that was really educational. So then the nerd me was like, oh, so there was a person. And then they were like, yeah, Coca-Cola. I said, oh, okay, well, all right, yeah.
Wonderful.
I do have a kind of a cute story.
Yeah.
That a Santa story of a kid. So in my neighborhood, I live in an extremely Jewish neighborhood, like really, really Jewish. And a lot of us are Orthodox Jewish. So, so my son grew up having a little bit of a false sense of what the world is like.
Yes.
So we walked into, he was like 3 years old, and we walked into Walgreens. Plus, we live in Los Angeles, so it's not like it's snowing or there's anything else out there. And so we walk into a Walgreens, and up, like really high up, there's a big inflatable Santa, with his beard and everything. And my son points up to it and says, Ema, which means mom, Ema, look, it's Noah.
Nice. There
He
you
had,
go.
he had no frame of reference whatsoever for what Santa Claus was. He sees a guy with a big beard, and so he thinks it's Noah. Anyway, I just thought that was cute.
And I mean, with all those reindeer, it's 2x2, just trying to keep
There
those
you go.
reindeer going
Exactly.
through the flood.
Walgreens did not have the reindeer on display, but yes.
Well, before I jump into the last one, Andre, I know you said you had a question as well.
Yeah, so my question is, are there gifts given like they are in traditional Christmas? Like, could we, a person who doesn't practice in Hanukkah, could we give a gift? And would that be offensive?
I mean, I'm never going to say no to a gift.
Who's going to say no to a gift? Like, seriously. Like, and also because the thought behind it is lovely. Like, why? So to be offended by that would be ridiculous. But it's not really a traditional thing, which is why a lot of families don't do it, or we just don't emphasize it. Like, yeah, we give some things in our house because it's fun and whatever, but there's no emphasis on it. It's not a big deal. But the tradition actually was, there is a tradition, especially in Eastern European Jewry, and I'm not even sure about like the, all the other the Sephardi Jews, the Middle Eastern Jews, I don't really know what their traditions are, but there is a tradition of giving gold coins or giving coins to the kids as a, I don't know, just it's called Hanukkah Geld. So that's kind of been translated into like chocolate coins now. So that's a big thing, is we do chocolate coins. So I think that, in all honesty, the whole presents thing really started because of the emphasis on Christmas and people seeing that. And so it kind of was like, oh, well, we got them for 8 nights, which is really not.
Right. I was going to say, I grew up just outside Philly, in the suburbs of Philly. And my school, it's like the opposite of where you went. And I think we've had this conversation, but like it was about like 80% Jewish that my high school, and a lot of them, and I say the majority of them, they got 8 presents. So they would get a present for every night of Hanukkah.
Now, are these like, I have so many questions now. Are these like big presents, like PlayStation games? Like,
my recollection was it varied, that there were some that were just kind of like you're really kind of minimal, and then maybe like the last couple days you would get the big ticket items.
Right.
But the
it
first
just depends. It depends
like,
on the family.
Yeah.
The way that a lot of my friends do it is that it's sort of the kind of stuff that you would put in a stocking, like a stocking stuffer, like those fun kind of small funny gifts. That's for like the first 7 days, and then on the 8th night there's like a bigger, like the bicycle that Santa left, that would appear
for the video game, whatever.
Night.
Yeah.
But to add to Batsheva, fun fact for us nerds, which is I had a friend who is an Indian Jew, so her family came from India, and because that Jewish community had left before the destruction of the temple, like 1,000 years ago,
left Israel
to immigrate and settle in India. Right. They never celebrated Hanukkah because there was no reason to celebrate Hanukkah. And it wasn't until they got into contact with like Eastern European Jews that they were like, oh, okay, do we celebrate this? Like,
that's actually true for Ethiopian and Ugandan Jews. Same thing.
Yeah.
They left before so that they didn't have that whole experience. So it was really interesting. Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely learning some things. I mean, from Adam Sandler being my only reference. This is a huge leap.
And here's a fun fact. I actually Adam Sandler went to NYU, and he was in a class he was in an acting class that I took as a director. And this is like right before he broke really big on the Cosby Show and stuff. So he was supposed to be, he was starting a stand-up, and he was supposed to do a scene that I was directing. He was supposed to be in it, and he kept canceling our rehearsals. And finally I was like, listen, Adam, I'm going to have to recast you. So my husband always jokes that I'm the first person who fired him.
Now that's a story.
Had he been on Remote Control on MTV yet? Because that's the first place that I remember him.
I have no idea.
Yeah, if you guys,
that would be right around that time.
Yeah,
he started to leak into the Cosby Show episodes.
Yeah, it was. I can tell you because he was a year or two behind me, and I was taking the class the year after I graduated, so it would have been like 86, 87 around that.
So that's about that time.
Around that area.
Well, Adam, if you're listening to the show, first of all, thank you. But if you ever want to come on and talk about that disappointing experience,
right? Of having to just do the Cosby Show and stand up instead of my scene, my excellent scene.
That has been the fuel for his entire career. So I'm going to prove that I'm worth something.
We're going to go back and watch the movies and see, like, where did he reference you?
Where's that track? Yes. I'm going to guess nowhere.
It has been an amazing conversation. So I want to close it out with this last thought. We've been doing some reflecting, and we touched a little bit about how we want to continue these traditions within our own families, whether it's Hanukkah or whether it's Christmas or something different. And so that's where I want to close out with. What do you plan on doing? How do you plan on continuing, these traditions? I know growing up, before I did all of this, I really wanted to get into, acting and all of that great stuff. And so I started my own tradition to see A Christmas Carol at the Goodman Theater in Chicago, which is a phenomenal performance. Even more so when I got to know some of the actors in the play, and I would be there with them and watching them. And that is something I want to do with my own family, is just sharing that experience with them. Mostly because I enjoy it. Maybe it's a little selfish, but still, just taking them and seeing one of these shows, or just during break, kind of coming together and going and seeing some type of production. It doesn't have to be A Christmas Carol, but that is something that I told them I want to start doing now that they're older. Hopefully they'll appreciate it a little more, and I don't know. We'll see where it goes. So we're going to continue popping off with somebody else starting off. So Betchev, I'm going to kick this one off to you to let you start this one off, and we'll just wrap around.
As I mentioned before, there's so many holidays and there's so many traditions. And I think just because that's how we live our lives every day, we are steeped in our traditions and in our religion and our spirituality. It's a part of everything we do in our life, every sort of moment of every day. So I think that's just, that's how it keeps moving on. And we see it through my kids, and as they're growing up, and my daughter is older and she lives in Israel, and seeing how she's, it's just sort of natural. There's not anything, we just live it, and that's all.
I can go next because I'm not an Orthodox Jew like Batsheva is. So I think a lot more working harder to put traditions into my life because I am so steeped in secularism. But I'm going to bring in my Canadian side, add some diversity there, which is in Canada, the day after Christmas is Boxing Day, and it's a British tradition that was carried over. And the idea is that you box up all of the stuff. So on Christmas, you've gotten new gifts, new clothing, all that stuff. And then you box up the old stuff to give to charity. And it's since been co-opted to be basically like Canada's Black Friday, Boxing Day sales. But just the idea of being thankful for what you've been given and what you have, and being considerate of, okay, what can I give to those that don't?
I'm really glad you mentioned that. Well, my husband's Canadian too. So we have a mixed marriage. But I never knew what Boxing Day was until you just said that. And I'm an Anglophile, so I totally should have known that. But when I originally heard the term, I thought it was like boxing. I was like, that's such a weird thing to do the day after Christmas.
Actually, why would you have boxing? It's Canada's version of the Purge. And on the 26th, you're allowed to punch one person who annoyed you that year.
I would be all in with that. I would be all in. Wow. That is the best holiday I've ever heard.
And then you have to apologize to them after.
I was going to say, I'm just worried I would be too many people's person. That's my only problem with that idea.
There has to be a rule. Like, I've already been hit 5 times.
Every principal saying that parent that's been on my nerves.
Yeah.
That kid that's been on that coworker. Yeah. Oh, that would be a fantastic day.
Yeah. One just left my office today. So,
hello.
I love that. Mealy, what about you?
I was going to say something that I think we're going to try and do going forward is we are transitioning. So my youngest is now 12, is transitioning into finding more movies to watch, because so much time we would spend, we would just do the Rudolph and the Frosty, and and those are good and fun to watch, but there comes a time where it's like, okay, so and I know I'm gonna shock some people, whatever, but I've never seen Home Alone all the way through. No one in my family has seen Home Alone all the way through. So we're going to start So we're going to start watching Home Alone. So that may end up becoming a tradition. My wife and I have watched, It's a Wonderful Life. We watch that almost every year. And the kids can barely sit through that. So I don't know if we still ever get them to make that their tradition. And I was sadly disappointed because last year I introduced them to A Christmas Story. And I knew my wife wouldn't like it because she doesn't like slapstick type stuff, which is why she probably won't like Home Alone either. But anyway, my kids didn't like A Christmas Story, and I'm like,
Really?
what? This is like awesome. So
Millie, that tradition will join in France at Home Alone, which is
yes,
Maman, j'ai raté l'avion,
it
which is
is.
like Mom, I missed the airplane, is like the Christmas movie. Like, forget
Yes,
It's a Wonderful Life, all that stuff. Like, all of France watches Home Alone. Or so
that
I've
is
been told by
interesting.
my French national friends.
That is
Wow.
interesting. You know, the Home Alone house is here in the suburbs.
It sure
No
is.
Okay.
Yeah.
way!
Yeah. And so it's funny though, right? Because I think as adults we watch that movie and we're like, I'm just curious, what does dad do? Like you got that
Oh,
house, you're taking the pan like dad.
we know what Dad did, right? Dad
Oh.
was able to give everybody first class. We know what
Hmm. Hmm. And on that note, the guy who wrote Christmas Story, he's he's from here. He's from like where I grew up from the. So every year, right now, in fact, the Hammond Welcome Center has this big old thing, and the actors come, and you can meet them, and it's a big thing. Yeah,
Okay.
so it's
Well,
yeah.
where I went to college is where Jimmy Stewart grew up, and there's actually I went to into Indiana, Pennsylvania, and there's a statue of him, and there's like a little dinky Jimmy Stewart airport that's in this little town. It's kind of like
I
north.
love
It's
him.
north of Pittsburgh. Yeah.
When
Nice.
I was in high school, I used to, when we had channels and you had to change them, it was a long time ago, for some of you, don't remember. But I remember that It's a Wonderful Life was on so many times and so many channels. And one year I was like, how many times can I watch this? And one time it was on two different channels. And I would flip back every time there was a commercial, I'd flip to the other one and start watching that. And when that commercial, and then I'd flip it
Oh my
back. And they
goodness.
were about an hour or half an hour like off of each other. So I would just like watch one and then go to the other and keep going back and forth. It was so funny.
Hmm.
It was a great movie.
Andre, what about you, sir?
So, of course, traditions change. Growing up with my wife, and we had two small babies. I was an elementary teacher. Oklahoma doesn't. Teachers don't get paid money anyway. But all of the gifts were really expensive, and I needed a new way because we were going broke or in debt trying to provide gifts. And so I remember asking a friend on Facebook, like, how do you all approach it? And they gave this to me, and I'll share it with you. And we kind of added our thing with it. The kids get four things: something to read, something you need, something to wear, something you want. That was it. And I was like, love it, taking it, stealing it, go. And so for maybe the last 8 years, something you can read. So, of course, all of their favorite books from bookstores would do it. Something to wear, something that they want. So, you want all of the commercials that you see, you're only getting one. And then something that you need. And so we adapted that and added two more parts, kind of like Boxing Day. Something to give,
Okay.
and then something to share.
Love it.
Nice. I
Oh, I
really
love
thought I was
that.
That's
gonna when you
cool.
said Boxing Day, I was like, don't like we're not calling DCFS, Andre, please don't.
Yeah.
One of my coworkers, it's really close to that. They said, "Well, Jesus only got three gifts, so you only get three gifts," and that's
I've heard that one too. Yeah,
yeah. So so they only get
and
their
one of them's
kids.
gonna be something to smell good. You're not getting all that stuff.
You either get
Yeah.
frankincense or myrrh, not both.
And they're gold.
You're gonna
So-
get Axe body spray, and that's about it.
Oh no,
I'm
not
telling
the
you.
Axe body
Yeah.
spray.
Oh, the gift that keeps on giving. I think
Yes.
that's beautiful, Andre. That's
Yeah,
really,
that is
really
cool.
lovely.
Yeah.
So-
And I think the best part of the gift was my kids, I remember one Christmas, and that's what made us change the whole thing. They got their new toys and they were just trying to discard the old ones that cost a whole lot of money. And I was like, we worked hard for that. And there are so many others who don't have these simple things. So we went and volunteered, and volunteering at a shelter. I didn't have to preach another word. I didn't have to say another word. They saw it for themselves. And that car ride home was the quietest I'd ever heard my kids. Our entire family is loud. I mean, I'm the leader of that.
I
But
thought
that
you were going to say
entire
I'm the quiet one.
Yeah, reflected home, quiet as a mouse. And then they were like, "Dad, we get it." And so from that point on, even now, they're like, "Dad, we just can't wait for family." And I'm like, "Me neither," because they
Nice.
know it's no longer about the gifts. It's about we would rather just spend time with our family members because some of them may not be here next year. I mean, all of the different things of life, and just really honing in on that time. So yeah, those are the six that I do now. Um, they're still gonna get some socks.
There you go.
They're still gonna, get the things, some pajamas that they need. I'm gonna probably still get a bow tie from one of them, but we're just limiting it as much as possible.
It's beautiful. I wish I would have known that many years ago, but you know.
It's really nice.
Well, I want to say we're just about an hour. Not that there's time frames on these things, but I definitely want to say thank you for joining me. Thank you for making this. What I would like to think of as another memorable show. I know I've learned a lot, not just about each and every single one of you, but about traditions and walked away with some things. So I just want to say thank you. I know earlier you mentioned the shows. So as we close out, I just want one last time, just for you to let listeners know where can they find you? Because if they weren't listening before, I hope that after this episode, you pop into their episodes, make sure that you're subscribing and following and liking their shows as well. So we're just going to go around one last time, share a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to call it an evening. So Andre, I'm going to kick things off with you, sir, and we'll just cut all the way around.
Yeah, there's only two Andre Dowdys in this nation, in this world, on social media. One's in New York. I'm the other one. And oddly, we both are musicians. We both love photography. We both do digital content. Only difference, I'm the educator. So you can find me at Andre, Andre, Dowdy, Daughty. And then I'm the guy with the bow tie. You should see me with the bow tie on just about all of them, it should be. And I'm on all the socials, and my podcast I co-host with my wife. It's called See What Had Happened. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you for being here, sir. Mealy.
Yeah. So on the Twitter at Unprocast. So just Unpro and cast like podcast. And if you Google Unprofessional Development Podcast, I'm pretty sure I come up just about every time. So there was another one that had like 2 episodes, and we have pretty much SEO'd them to further down the page, maybe on the dreaded page 2 of Google. They might even be now. So I don't know. I know everyone's Google is different, so I know when I Google it, I don't see them anywhere anymore. I used to. So yeah. So Unprofessional Development and Twitter at Unprocast.
All right. Thank you for being here, Aviva.
Yeah, so lessonimpossible.com is where you can find podcast links and the blog. And then on social media, Twitter, it's at Aviva11. Instagram is at lessonimpossible. And if you Google search Aviva11, you will actually find quite more than there are Andre Dowdys. But Lesson Impossible plus my name, that's pretty unique.
There you go. Thank you. Yeah, don't Google Charles Williams. Like, that's a ridiculously popular name. So. I'm
Days
trying.
later.
I'm trying. All right. Thank you, Batsheva. You are up.
So I'm Batsheva Frankel with my podcast is Overthrowing Education, and Twitter is at Overthrowing Ed, Instagram at Overthrowing Education. You can also do at Batsheva Frankel, or Instagram is at batsheva.frankel. And my company is newlensed.com. And yeah, that's pretty much everything. And there's only a couple Batsheva Frankels. I take up most of the first page of Google with all kinds of wacky. You can learn a lot of wacky things about me.
Nice. Well, I want to just say thank you. As I always close out, thank you for all the great work that you're doing out there. Thank you for being on the show. Just thank you for being amazing guests. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope that each and every single one of you and the viewers, the listeners, wherever you may be, you have a wonderful holiday, whatever it is that you celebrate or don't celebrate. Still have an amazing holiday season. Be safe out there, and I will see all of you very soon. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.